The millionaire's 3 daughters suddenly disappeared during their 5th birthday party. 30 years later, once again, the millionaire burst into tears when he saw, "Mum, I want to wear the red dress," Ilara exclaimed, as if that were more important than the entire party being arranged in the yard. Adele paused for a moment while tying a yellow ribbon on her younger daughter, Isla, then looked at the eldest of the 3 with a faint smile. "Then wear the red one," she replied evenly, and turned away, continuing her unfinished task. Victor walked in from the hallway, adjusting his cufflinks. He saw the scene and simply smiled, leaning slightly against the white wooden doorframe. Ilara walked barefoot on the wooden floor, the red dress a little long past her knees, fumbling with the zipper on her back. Isla sighed and helped her zip it up. Meanwhile, Sylvie, the youngest, quietly sat by the window, folding napkins into butterfly shapes. No one taught her that. No one asked why. Victor walked over, bent down, and whispered to his youngest daughter, "Who are you giving those butterflies to?" Sylvie gave a small shrug and smiled with her eyes. The Langston estate's backyard began to fill up. Strings of lights were hung from the old oak tree to the white wooden porch. A 3-tier birthday cake was placed on a long, lace-covered table, decorated with 3 small dolls with blonde hair, just like the 3 sisters. At the base of the stone staircase was a bench where family photos were usually taken. The sound of children's laughter mingled with the gentle piano music coming from a small speaker hung on a lamp post. Ilara ran back and forth, holding a candy shaped like a horse, trying to recall the song her father often sang on winter nights, "Sleep, my stars. Close your eyes." But as she mumbled the words, "Close your eyes," she saw her mother Adele standing by the porch, quietly watching the crowd through a wineglass. Mr. Richard Grant arrived with his wife and son, one of the first guests, an important partner of Victor. They shook hands back and forth, and Grant's son brought a pretty pink gift box to the 3 girls. "Happy birthday, Ilara, Isla, Sylvie. My dad had these 3 brooches made in France. Hope you like them." The atmosphere grew more joyful as one guest family after another arrived. Mrs. Green from the City Entrepreneurs Association, Mr. Whitmore from the law firm, and countless other influential figures. Matthew Bellamy appeared as if stepping out from some forgotten corner of time. A long grey coat, neatly combed hair, holding a small wooden box with handcrafted patterns. He smiled, his eyes scanning the crowd, then stopping at Adele. She merely nodded. "Sorry for being late. I had to stop by the hospital first," he said. No one asked where he went, nor did they mention his wife, who had just passed away a few weeks earlier. Bellamy bent down and handed the gift to the 3 children. A talking doll. "Each sister says one thing, and the doll will repeat it," he explained. Ilara didn't seem interested. Isla took the box, and Sylvie examined the doll's face with suspicion. Victor came over and shook his hand. "Glad you made it. We all know a good doctor like you must be very busy." Bellamy gave a faint smile. "No one should miss the last day of perfection." Victor frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just joking. The last day when the girls are 4. Bellamy raised his glass, his eyes unsmiling. Everyone laughed at the joke. "The Langston girls grow up so fast," a woman agreed. Adele avoided Bellamy's presence. She stood alone in the garden, her hand fingering the pearl necklace on her neck, like a self-soothing habit. Victor came over, seeing his wife in silence, and softly said, "Just a few hours, for the kids." Adele looked at him. Her eyes were dark, still as stagnant water. For the kids. Adele had suffered from an anxiety disorder since giving birth to the children. Bellamy had become her personal doctor, but sometimes when she saw him, she thought of her illness, the very thing that might dampen today's joy. Night gradually fell. The string lights lit up like tiny stars. The temperature dropped slightly. The scent of vanilla from the cake spread through the air. Victor sat near the long table, his eyes following every step of his 3 daughters. Despite all his worries, he still believed today was the most beautiful day of his life. Bellamy turned, clinking glasses with him. "Drink. Today, you should enjoy it fully. Trust me." Victor clinked his glass and cheerfully replied, "It's great when a doctor lets me drink more wine." Bellamy gave a faint smile. "Today, you're the happiest man, not the kids, because you're the man with 3 reasons to be happy. But sometimes, happiness is fragile." Victor was about to respond when a voice called out from afar, "Everyone, get ready for the photo." The 3 girls sat together on the bench at the foot of the stairs, their faces bathed in the golden evening light. Ilara in the middle, Isla on the right, Sylvie on the left. Ilara's red dress stood out against the green grass. The camera was mounted on a tripod. The gardener pressed the timer button and ran over. 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Victor told a servant to go check. "There might be an issue with the electrical system, sir. I'll look into it right away." A moment was captured, a frozen slice of peace. "We apologize for the incident. Everyone, please continue enjoying yourselves." Victor smiled as the lights came back on, wrapping an arm around Adele's waist, watching the 3 sisters play with the other children in the distance out on the lawn. Less than 10 minutes later, as the guests returned to the cake table, the children's laughter faded. A woman asked, "Where are the girls?" Another said, "I just saw them running to the back." Victor stepped quickly, looking around. "Ilara, Isla, Sylvie." No response. A wooden doll lay under the steps, glass eyes staring up at the sky. A breeze passed by, making the string lights clink softly. A gardener came running from the stables, his voice panicked. "Mr. Langston, I don't see the girls anywhere. I just saw 3 dresses flutter past the wall. I thought they were playing hide and seek." The music stopped abruptly. The atmosphere felt like someone had sucked all the air out. Names were called in chaos. Footsteps rustled across the yard. Urgent noises rang out like a melody cut off mid-string. The birthday cake hadn't been cut. 3 small candles continued to burn, wax dripping down, unnoticed. The bench at the foot of the stairs was empty. No trace of the 3 girls in red, yellow, and blue dresses. No more high-pitched laughter. No more clumsy hand-holding between sisters. Nothing remained but a wooden doll, face down, glass eyes turned up to the grey sky. Victor Langston stood still for a few seconds. Just a few seconds. But they stretched like a lifetime. He stepped toward the bench, looking around. No Ilara, no Isla, no Sylvie. He turned to the right where the door to the back garden was still ajar. His foot touched a red ribbon, the tiny bow Adele had carefully tied in Ilara's hair not half an hour before. "Ilara, Isla, Sylvie!" His voice rang out, filled with hope at first, then turning into a heavy, urgent call. No answer. "Where did they go?" he asked, turning, eyes quickly scanning every guest's face. A woman in a blue dress nearby whispered to her husband, "I think the kids are hiding somewhere in the house." A boy said, "I saw the red-haired girl go into the woods." Someone chuckled, very softly, as if to lighten the mood, but the laughter fell into nothingness. Victor moved faster now, his voice almost snapping. "No one saw the girls?" No one. Adele was standing behind the glass door. She had been still ever since the girls had their photo taken, unmoving, silent. In her hand was a full wineglass, untouched, her lips never reaching it. Her eyes looked through the crowd, not resting on anyone, as if waiting for a sign from elsewhere. Bellamy appeared beside her. He didn't touch her shoulder, didn't call her name, just stood there quietly, like a shadow. Then, after a few seconds, he spoke just softly enough that even the wind had to go silent to hear. "You'll be all right, Adele. Don't get too emotional. It's not good for your health. The pain, it'll ease." Adele turned her head slowly. Her eyes were dry. She didn't ask Bellamy, "How can I be calm?" Nor did she answer. Her hand gripped the glass so tightly, her knuckles turned white. In the backyard, Victor moved heavily through the now anxious crowd. Some guests were searching near the bushes. Others gathered near the cake table, worriedly murmuring to each other. The children were herded into one corner. Staff members whispered, "Were the girls wearing coats? They could get cold if they ran to the lake." In the villa's living room, the crowd murmured among themselves. "Do you think it could be a kidnapping? No one was guarding the gate. How many staff does this house have? Oh God, what if it was someone in the family?" The TV in the next room was still on. No one turned it off. On screen was a live broadcast from outside the Langston estate. A blonde-haired reporter with heavy eyeliner, her voice cold. The mysterious disappearance of the 3 girls, daughters of millionaire Victor Langston, is shocking local authorities. We are live at the Langston estate, where a 5th birthday party had just taken place. Rachel Gunn, the woman Victor had refused an exclusive interview with 3 months ago, needed no invitation this time. Victor jerked his head around. On the screen was the image of the mansion gate, and a crowd of police officers was starting to appear. Only 30 minutes after the first scream rang out, a grey civilian car pulled up. Out stepped a small-framed woman with neatly tied hair and eyes as sharp as a drawn thread. Marisol Reyes, the city's criminal investigation inspector, was at the party thanks to an invitation from a friend in the force. She wasn't in uniform, didn't wear a badge, but walked straight into the crowd as if she were the only one who knew what she was doing. "Set up a quarantine perimeter around the backyard. Check all entrances and exits. Don't let anyone leave the house without logging their name." Reyes gave her orders crisply. She knelt beside the bench, inspected the red ribbon, then looked toward the forest. A waiter approached. I saw a strange car parked near the fence once, but I thought it was a guest." "Write down the plate number, description," Reyes said, without looking up. But just a few minutes later, Chief Ruggles arrived. He appeared with 2 officers in tow, his pace slow and solemn. The moment the tension started to rise, it froze like being doused in cold water. "Inspector Reyes," Ruggles called out, his voice deep and deliberate. "You can step back. This case will be handled by me and the task force." "With all due respect," Reyes replied, "the children have been missing for less than half an hour. I was the first to arrive on the scene. I know," Ruggles interrupted, "but this is the home of a very influential person. We need to proceed carefully, very carefully." Reyes looked at him for a long time, then slowly stepped back, but kept writing in her notebook. "Unusual tire tracks at the north gate. Faint drag marks near the garden." No one responded. Ruggles turned to the staff and nodded. The 2 officers approached and politely escorted her away from the central area. As Reyes left, Victor didn't notice. He was crouched beside the bench, clutching the ribbon tightly, his eyes fixed on the ground. No tears, no sobs, only a kind of silence that kept people at a distance. Bellamy stood behind him again. This time, he gently placed a hand on Victor's shoulder and leaned in slightly. "I know this pain, Victor. I lost my daughter last year. At first, I couldn't breathe either. But then, it passes." Victor didn't turn. He kept staring toward the woods, where darkness was slowly seeping into the trees. The first drop of rain touched his shoulder, as quiet as everything that was happening. Wind shook the trees, causing the light strings to sway, their glow flickering like flames about to die. Victor tightened his grip on the ribbon. No one saw his eyes, but if they had, they would have noticed something had cracked, but not broken, like a father desperately trying to hold on to the last image of his child in his mind before the darkness swallows it whole. The wind continued to blow along the path leading to the Langston mansion, a large, old, and cold house, just like its owner. Moss dotted the paving stones. One side of the wooden fence was rotted, warped, seemingly standing more from habit than from strength. Every morning at exactly 7:15, Victor Langston stepped out from the back door, wearing an old wool coat with a velvet collar, holding a white cloth handkerchief. He walked a loop around the garden, as if to make sure nothing had disappeared again. Then he stopped in front of the oak bench at the foot of the stairs, where, 30 years ago, his 3 daughters once sat. The bench was now worn at the edges, its paint peeling in patches. But he still dusted it every day, meticulously and slowly, as if wiping the wrinkles from his own forehead. No one sat there anymore, but he still wiped it. Mrs. Beatrice, Victor's older sister, lived upstairs, always woke up an hour after him, but often watched him from the window. She didn't call out, didn't remind him, just let her brother live by the rhythm he needed to maintain, so he wouldn't break. She once said, "It's strange, Victor. You've lost everything, but you're still living better than many who have it all." He simply replied, "Because I remember clearly everything I've lost." People still passed by the Langston mansion every day. Some stopped their cars to look, others pointed. The whispers grew like vines along the old walls. "I heard he had bad blood with some businessman. The kids disappearing after the party. Isn't that too strange?" "I heard a rumor. It was his mistress. His wife died just 2 years later. Maybe she found out something and they silenced her. Or was it him?" Victor didn't react. He had heard every version of the story. Rumors were the only thing that never disappeared. They outlived even the truth. That afternoon, a light rain fell. He ate dinner alone in the small dining room, his hand trembling slightly as he poured soup into his bowl. Beatrice was absent, attending her church book club meeting. The television was on, as it was every evening, not to be watched, but just to fill the silence. A local news report aired, a story about a small charity supporting orphans in the northern mountain region. Children's laughter, the sound of running feet, sunlight filtering through leaves, all served as a backdrop to the steady narration. But then, he froze. On screen, amidst the children, a young woman bent down to tie a little boy's shoelaces. She turned toward the camera, just for a moment. That face, those eyes. Not a fleeting resemblance, but a painful familiarity, like someone pressing a finger into an old wound that never healed. The voice-over continued. "That's Ilara, a volunteer who's been with the camp for nearly 4 years. She grew up in the foster system and chose to stay to help children like herself." Ilara. Victor dropped the spoon. The bowl tilted, yellow soup spilling across the table, dripping onto the tiled floor. He shot to his feet, the chair crashing behind him, his chest heaving. Blood rushed to his temples. He could hear nothing now. The room was filled only with the sound of his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The girl on the screen gave a small smile. She turned slightly to the right, and the light fell on her neck, revealing a small, teardrop-shaped birthmark. Victor stumbled closer to the screen, as if afraid the image might dissolve. His hand shook violently as he reached for the remote and paused the video. Then he collapsed into the chair, gasping for breath. For several minutes, he did nothing. He didn't call anyone, didn't rewind the TV. He just sat there, eyes locked on the frozen image of the girl, whose eyes he had seen every day during the first 5 years of Ilara's life. A while later, He stood up. His steps were slow, cautious, as if the slightest misstep would shatter everything he had just realized. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a photo taken on a birthday 30 years ago. 3 little girls sitting on a bench, a blurry car in the background, and the shadow of an adult in the distance, a shadow no one had ever identified. He placed the old photo next to the image on the screen. His hands trembled, but he held on tightly. His eyes were no longer sharp, but the lines of the face, the curve of the eyes, the corner of the mouth when smiling, all said the same thing. Victor swallowed hard. He didn't cry, but something flickered in his eyes. Not quite hope, but life being breathed back into a heart that had slept for too long. He touched Ilara's image, his finger trembling as if tracing a crack in time. "It's you," he whispered, his voice catching like a breeze through dry leaves, and the room fell silent, as if the entire house were holding its breath to listen. In a house as vast as the Langston estate, there were doors that, though only a few steps away, could separate a person from their own life for an entire lifetime. The room at the end of the ground floor hallway, where light always hesitated to enter, was one such door. Everyone called it the storage room, but Victor had never believed it was merely a place for old things. It was the tomb where he had buried his hope 30 years ago, and now he was about to unearth it. The white-painted wooden door, worn and aged, bore an X-shaped scratch near the handle, a mark Ilara had once carved with a plastic spoon, whispering, "I'm marking it so I can find it again someday." The whole family had laughed then. Adele had scolded her fondly. "Drawing curses on the house, are you?" Today, it was he, Victor Langston, who stood before that curse. In his hand was a faded keyring. It took him several tries before finding the right one. The old lock groaned, creaking like his joints on a cold morning. When the door opened, it let out a long, slow squeal, like the breath of a room sealed shut for 3 decades. Beatrice stood behind him, her hands tightly clasped together. She didn't ask anything, nor did she help push the door open. This was Victor's door. That pain belonged to him alone. A dim light flicked on, the yellow glow cast over the thick layer of dust, illuminating hundreds of familiar objects that now seemed from another era. Audio tapes, yellowed documents, scattered maps, old photos with curled corners, and countless thick notebooks filled with left-leaning handwriting. Victor's handwriting when he was under stress. Right in the center of the room stood a large wooden board, nearly human-sized. On it, a diagram of a teardrop-shaped birthmark was drawn in red ink, with lines connecting to 3 locations, 3 geographic regions, 3 theories about the fate of his 3 daughters. "I kept everything," Victor said, so softly it sounded like he was speaking only to himself. Beatrice walked around, her eyes scanning each photograph. One showed Ilara at age 3, sitting on a wooden floor, holding a fairy tale book with a torn spine. Another showed Isla grinning broadly after smearing cake all over her little sister Sylvie's face. Each photo was like a silent knife pinned to the wall of memory. "I never let go," Beatrice said, voice choked. Victor shook his head, eyes still fixed on the board. "I did let go. Every day I tried to let go. But memories cling like tree roots. They won't let me leave. Today I know. My children, they're alive." He opened a drawer and pulled out a cassette recorder, its plastic frame yellowed with age. He inserted batteries, took a long breath as if bracing himself to face the sound about to come. Click. "Good night, my darlings. Daddy loves you. Close your eyes now. Don't let the grey dragon climb into your bed. Daddy's right here," young Victor's voice echoed, unclear but full of tenderness. Faint giggles and sleepy yawns of children followed. And then silence. The sweet silence of peaceful nights. He never thought he'd miss this desperately. Beatrice turned away, wiping her tears with her sleeve. Victor pressed stop, placing the recorder down as though setting a piece of his soul back into its rightful place. "Sis," he said after a long pause, "what do you think I should do?" Beatrice sat down in a chair. Her eyes were red, but her voice steady. "Victor, if it were me, I'd leave this house first thing tomorrow. I'd go to where that girl lives. If you've buried your life for 30 years to preserve memories, then now, at the very least, you must fight to reclaim one of the 3 little ones who once called you Dad." "Fight," he repeated. "I'm not quick anymore. I've lost my connections. I don't have the money I used to. But you still have faith, and I'm still here." Simple words. Yet it was the first time in so many years that Victor heard "I'm still here" so clearly. He stood up, picked up the landline phone, and flipped through a faded old contact book. After a few rings, an elderly man's voice came on. "Hello? Harold? It's me, Victor." A brief silence. "God? Victor? It's been 10 years. I need an investigator, a detective. I think I found one of them." On the other end, the sound of a chair creaked. "Tell me everything." Victor looked toward the pinboard, where a photo of Ilara, taken from a TV screen, showed her smiling, her eyes lit with a kind of glow that didn't belong to a girl raised in an orphanage, but to the little girl who once sat at the foot of the stairs. Red dress, flaring, cake in hand, singing the birthday song, off-beat. That photo was pinned with a single red thumbtack, the only one not faded, not rusted. "Harold, I'm about to start over, and I need you with me this time." Wind blew through a crack in the door. Inside the room that had been locked for 30 years, the light was no longer dim yellow. It felt warmer now, as if it had come alive again with every buried memory, every laugh on the old tape, every trembling image on the walls. Victor stepped back. He looked over the entire room, as if seeing it for the first time with new eyes. This was no longer a place to hold sorrow. It was a strategy room for a journey to reclaim the truth. And this time, he was no longer alone. Autumn in the southern suburbs of the city carried a unique quiet. As if everyone was trying to live more gently, to avoid breaking whatever was still left. In an old red brick building, tucked into a street lined with defunct clock shops and clearance stores, there was a small office with no signboard, no doorbell, just a faded line of text on frosted glass, Deaver's investigation. Jerome Deavers sat behind his desk, reading a thick file bathed in yellow light from the desk lamp, as if the light were probing into a case still alive in the dark. The man didn't look old, but neither was he young. His eyes were the only thing that truly showed his age. Cold, deep, and used to seeing the truth where no one wanted to look. A knock echoed on the door 3 times. Firm, not timid. Jerome looked up. He already knew the door opened. Victor Langston stepped in, wearing an old overcoat, leather shoes with worn toes, and holding a brown paper envelope. He said nothing, just placed the envelope on the desk and pulled a chair to sit across from him. Jerome didn't ask. He opened the envelope. Inside was an old photo, 3 girls in red, yellow, and blue dresses, a cassette tape, and a handwritten note with just 4 words: "I want the truth." Jerome sat still for a moment, eyes fixed on the photo. "They disappeared in '93, Victor said, voice steady but strained. "I was quietly accused, then publicly forgotten. People eventually started calling them the 3 golden-haired angels." He looked Jerome straight in the eyes. "Now I believe one of them is still alive. I need to find the other 2. I can't wait through another winter." Jerome nodded slightly. "Do you have a location?" Victor handed over a newspaper with Ilara's picture. "This is all I have. And my memory." Jerome opened his laptop and began typing. The bluish glow of the screen lit his face, making it look almost expressionless. But beneath that stillness, something had begun to stir. 2 days later, in the dim office, Jerome stood before a data board he had plastered across 3 walls with sticky notes and faded photos. He crossed out name after name: waitstaff, guests, relatives, the wine delivery man, the gardener, information he had gathered from news articles, event records, even forgotten clips on old VHS tapes. He stopped at one name: Matthew Bellamy. A short note beside it: "Langston family therapist. Attended the birthday party. Appears in no photos, videos." Jerome frowned. He cross-checked. Bellamy was indeed on the guest list, but no pictures of him, no interviews, no footage. Gone as if he'd never been there. Stranger still, when Jerome checked Bellamy's personal data through public records, he found Bellamy's wife had died just 1 month before that fateful party. Died in a private room. No cause stated in the papers. Autopsy sealed. Jerome glanced back at the photo board. If you're listening, leave a comment saying moon if it's dark where you are, and if it's still light, write sun. Bellamy, a man who had just lost his wife, still attended a birthday party for 3 little girls. No one took his photo. No one remembered where he stood. A wife who died under unclear circumstances. Sealed records. Information hollow, like a room cleaned of all evidence. He reopened the lullaby tape Victor had given him, listened closely to every sound, every note. The ending was a long sigh from Victor after the words, "Daddy's here." But before that, something strange. A faint click, very small, like the sound of a secondary recording device. A chill crept down his spine. Jerome replayed the recording, turning up the volume. The click was clearer. Someone had recorded Victor's lullaby, not just Victor himself. Who had the tape? Who used it? Later that day, Jerome sent an email to Victor. The subject was only 3 words. He was there. The body contained 3 short lines: Matthew Bellamy. On the birthday party list. No photo evidence. Wife died 1 month before the party. Unstable psychology. Signs of suppressed personal and medical records after 1993. Below that, 1 final line, set apart. We need to unravel that entire party and start with the man without a face. That night, as Victor read Jerome's email, he stood up and walked slowly toward the storage room. The lights in the house dimmed. Wind passed through the old fence. And in the dark, the image of Bellamy, the man always wearing a black fedora with drooping eyes and a whispery voice, returned, like a faint scar still unhealed. Only this time, Victor didn't look away. He knew the hunt had just begun. The records room was on the 2nd floor of the old city police department, where sunlight never reached. The cold metal file cabinets stood tall like monuments of time, separating what was known from what was buried. Natalie Vance placed both hands on the armrests of the chair, signaling for Victor to sit. The man who had endured 3 decades of pain sat down gently, as if performing a ritual, not because he was frail, but because every step he took now carried the weight of unnamed sorrow. Marisol Reyes was already seated, prepared. Her hair was now nearly white, but her gaze had not changed. It was still the sharp, unwavering look of someone who had lived on the belief that justice, if pursued long enough, would return. "Mr. Langston," Reyes began, her voice deep and direct like a scalpel. "We were once very close to the truth. Very close. But then they slammed the door shut." Victor said nothing. He looked into her eyes as if no words were needed to confirm. He had known that for 30 years. Reyes opened an old file, the edges frayed. A page was marked with a dull plastic tab. Matthew Bellamy, she read slowly, a psychologist privately hired for the Langston family starting in March 1992. Records show therapy sessions with your wife lasted nearly a year until she passed away. And after that? Natalie spoke up, leaning forward. Reyes turned the page. Here. She pointed at a redacted section, then flipped to another photocopy. I kept the unprocessed copy. There's an internal report from Hopeville Orphanage, 1991. Bellamy had been complained about for inappropriate behavior toward minors in a group therapy setting. But no one pursued that investigation. No one. Why was it removed from the official file? Natalie asked, her voice tinged with anger. Reyes looked up. Because he was protected. Someone was behind him. And because we, at the time, had nothing but suspicion and instinct. Victor remained silent. His hand on the table trembled slightly. Not from age, but from the feeling of truth being switched out. His 3 daughters had been placed in the hands of a man trying to heal himself by breaking others. Reyes closed the file, pulling out an old map. She pointed to 3 red marks, 3 major charity shelters that operated from 1993 to 1995. We once speculated, if it was a trafficking case, the children were no longer in the country. But if it was a family ecosystem breakdown, then they were taken to 3 separate locations, entirely isolated, yet under the same system of manipulation. And him? Victor asked, eyes fixed on the map. Reyes looked at him. He vanished from records after late 1993. But once, in 1995, someone using medical papers under a different name, Henry Delmore, was admitted for treatment of temporary cognitive disorder. The face nearly matched Bellamy's photo. Natalie quickly opened her laptop and entered the data. That name was used to register at a nursing home in Edenridge, small town, Western Mountain region. The room fell silent. Only the sound of typing and the heavy breathing of 3 people, long accustomed to disappointment, but not yet fully devoid of faith. We go. Victor stood. It wasn't a request, but a decision. Edenridge, a town with just 1 main road, 2 coffee shops, and 3 gas stations. The wind there seemed to belong to no season, only to an ancient sorrow waiting to be named. The Eden Pines nursing home lay nestled at the foot of a hill, its dusty glass windows and half-drawn curtains, as though no one ever needed to look outside. Victor and Reyes stood before the main door. A young nurse led them through a wood-paneled corridor, pointing to the last room on the left. Mr. Henry doesn't talk much, doesn't like visitors. Every time someone new shows up, he reacts violently. Reyes nodded. Let us handle it. The door creaked open. The air was thick with the smell of bleach and rotting wood. A man sat on the bed, his shoulders narrow, his hair sparse. But his eyes, when they met Victor's, suddenly contracted. Bellamy. The old man screamed like an animal cornered. Get out of here, he shouted. I don't know anything. I have nothing left. Reyes stepped back, but Victor didn't. He stepped forward, without fear, without hesitation. Just a father, 30 years deprived of asking one question. You know me, and you know why I'm here. Victor said, his voice steady but heavy like a slab of stone. Bellamy trembled. They were fine. They were loved. I didn't hurt them. Is separation love? Victor asked, each word falling like blood, dripping from a heart. Reyes sat down across from Bellamy. We only need one thing, Matthew. One name, one camp, one memory. Just one. Bellamy turned his face to the wall. His eyes were wet. Whether it was fear, regret, or just the delusion of a soul long lost? No one could tell. The room was silent for a long time. Then Bellamy whispered, "The car. Silver grey. I took the first one in that car. To New Haven." She sang the whole way. Victor stepped back. It felt like someone had pried open his heart. For the first time in 30 years, a real fragment had been lifted from the ground. There are mountains in the north where the wind never stops. It's not strong, not gusty, but persistent, like a sigh held in for generations. Every morning, when the sun was just timidly peeking through the towering pines, Ilara was already awake. She slipped on her worn boots, threw on the knee-length wool coat, and stepped outside, walking the path from the children's camp to the well. Shelter Pines Camp was nothing special, just a cluster of modest wooden houses in the valley, paint peeling off the walls, the playground rugged with rocks and mud. But to the children there, it was the whole world. And to Ilara, it was the only place where she felt she had meaning. She didn't remember much of her childhood, just broken fragments, a lullaby with missing words, a red-painted wooden chair, sometimes a fleeting laugh in a dream. But she remembered clearly the feeling of something missing. Not a thing, a person. 1, 2, 3, Ilara shouted as she blew soap bubbles with the kids. Lucas Ortega, an 8-year-old boy with a faint long scar on his cheek, was the child closest to Ilara. He didn't talk much, but he drew constantly. Lucas's drawings were always the same. A girl with silver wings standing between two shadowy figures, their hands joined. Behind them, a pine forest and a house with a round window. "Did you draw me again?" Ilara laughed, wiping soap from her hands. "No." Lucas shook his head. "It's your sister. There are 3 who look the same." Ilara stopped smiling. "I don't have any sisters," she said quietly. Lucas looked straight at her, then said very softly, "That's not true. I saw it in a dream. You sang that song, then they sang with you." Ilara didn't know how to respond. She just bent down, ruffled Lucas's hair. "You dream too much." But that night, sitting alone in her room, she began to hum the melody Lucas mentioned. A strange, gentle, haunting tune. Though she didn't recall ever learning it, the song flowed from her lips effortlessly, like it had always been a part of her body. The next morning, a strange man appeared at the camp gate. He wore a long overcoat, his face lined with wrinkles, eyes tired but not cold. Ilara saw him from a distance while hanging clothes. She walked out to meet him. "Excuse me, who are you looking for?" she asked. The man stared at her for a long time, his eyes stopping at her right neck, where there was a small teardrop-shaped birthmark Ilara had never paid attention to. "Are you Ilara?" he asked, voice low and hoarse like it had been scraped with stone. She was cautious. "I'm Ilara. But who are you?" The man didn't answer. He only bowed his head, reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a neatly folded handwritten letter, and placed it on the wooden fence in front of her. "I'm sorry. I can't say anything yet." He turned away, walking slowly like someone who had just completed a heavy ritual. Ilara picked up the letter, heart pounding. On the envelope, only 4 hastily scrawled words. "Dad still remembers the song." That night she sat by the window for a long time and opened the letter. The handwriting inside was slightly slanted and trembling. "My dear, if you don't remember me, that's okay. I still remember you, and every word you sang. There were 3 little birds once sitting on a bench, wearing red, yellow, and blue dresses. You were one of the 3. Do you know every morning I still wipe that bench, even though no one sits on it anymore? Read this letter with all your heart. Then decide. I won't force you. But if you've ever wondered why you always dream of a singing voice, Why in your sleep there are two small hands holding each other. Then you know, it's memory, not imagination. Ilara folded the letter. Her hands trembled. Outside, the wind passed through the pine groves again, and in the wind, she heard a voice, very distant, very old. It wasn't hers, it was someone else's. Someone like her. In the city, Jerome Devers and Natalie Vance simultaneously called Victor urgently. In their hands was a dossier passed on by Reyes, detailed, complete, unblurred. Matthew Bellamy used hypnosis to suppress early memories in children, Natalie said, her voice cold. He had accomplices helping him place the 3 children in 3 different facilities. He changed their names, forged records, embedded them into the foster system. A web of lies, Jerome added. Reyes concluded, the motive is clear. Bellamy lost his child, lost his wife, suffered severe psychological trauma. I believe he thought he was enduring tragedy while Victor invited him to a happy family gathering. To him, that was an insult. He once wrote, "Family is an illusion that only fools believe in. I will prove it is a lie." Victor sat still. The wind outside the window drifted through the old roof tiles. The wind was no longer gentle. It blew hard like a calling voice, calling him onward. Onward, to reunite the other 2 hands, to reassemble the beings of 3 children once torn apart like roots ripped from the earth. But this time, Ilara had heard that voice, the voice in the wind. The town of Raventon lay hidden in a small valley, where winding slopes led to the only hospital, Raventon Mercy, a 3-story building with white paint faded grey from the wind and dust of time. Winter had not yet come, but the cold here already seeped through sleeves whenever morning dew clung to the old tiled roofs. The townspeople lived simply, asked little, and shared even less. Isla Lawn was part of that town. She lived in a 2nd-floor apartment above an old bakery, walking every morning through the main street to the hospital. She was a nurse, punctual, careful, meticulous, to the point of being mechanical. Her colleagues said Isla had gentle eyes, but distant, as if always waiting for something she herself couldn't name. In her duty room, everything was always in order. No family photos, only a few monochrome prints, a forest, a lake shore, and a bench beneath a tree. Isla didn't know why she had chosen those pictures. She just felt close to them, like an old dream repeating night after night, with children laughing and a yellow dress fluttering in the sunlight. One afternoon, as Isla was checking patient records in the recovery unit, Mrs. Catherine Goldsmith, a mildly senile elderly patient, suddenly grabbed her hand. "Blonde girl, yellow dress," the old woman whispered, eyes wide. "I saw you, in 1993, crying in the forest. On your hand, a small birthmark." Isla froze. "What did you say?" The old woman closed her eyes. That crying sound, I never forgot. I was lost, trying to find my way back to the old camp. Saw a little girl sitting, clutching a wooden doll. That girl was you. Isla sat down beside her. She smiled as gently as always, but inside she was unraveling. "I remember nothing before age 6, she said, admitting it aloud for the first time. "All the photos in my foster records begin from that year. No one existed before that." That night, Isla didn't go home. She stayed at the hospital, lying on the bench near the administration office, listening to the fans' soft whirring and trying to piece together the fragments in her head. A voice inside her said, "That's memory, not imagination." But she didn't know who she was remembering, or why it made her heart race like that. 3 days later, a man appeared at the reception desk. He wore a wrinkled shirt, an old leather jacket, carried a document bag, and didn't smile. Jerome Devers. He didn't say much, just left an envelope for Isla with a message. "There's something in here you need to know." Isla opened the envelope in the break room. Inside were three things: a black and white photo of a laughing little girl in a yellow dress standing between two other girls, one in red, one in blue. A faint caption on the photo read, "Ilara Isla Sylvie, 5th birthday." The second item was a child's drawing, a picture of three people holding hands under a large tree with an old house in the background. And the third was a photo clipped from television. Ilara, the girl volunteering at Shelter Pines. Isla was stunned. Her hand instinctively reached to her neck, touching the familiar spot, a tear-shaped birthmark. Her hand began to tremble. She didn't know when she had started crying, only that she sat there for a long time, eyes locked on the mirror, as if waiting for the girl in the photo to step out and call her name once more. A soft knock sounded at the duty room door. She turned. The man from the photo, Victor Langston, was standing at the threshold. His face was much older, hair fully grey, eyes bearing more longing than anything Isla had ever seen. He didn't step inside. He just stood there, hands clasped in front of his stomach, head bowed slightly. Tears silently streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I couldn't protect you." Isla didn't respond. She simply stood up, walked toward the door, but stopped a few steps away from him. "Why?" she asked. "Why did I live a life I didn't choose?" Victor didn't answer immediately. He simply pulled something from his coat pocket, an old, faded wooden doll, the very doll Mrs. Goldsmith once mentioned. "You used to hold it every night," he said. "It was the only thing you wouldn't let go of when you left home. And now, it's all I have left to give you." Isla took the doll. She didn't cry anymore. Her eyes were still moist, but steady, as if deep within, a glacier had cracked, making way for warm waters to begin flowing again. Jerome stood outside, watching. He texted Natalie Vance. "Found the second piece. Isla Langston. She knows." Natalie replied, "Good. Keep them close, we're still missing one." One piece left. One more lost soul still waiting to be named. But today, in a small town at the foot of the mountains, between a young nurse and an aging father, a piece of the truth was just returned. The Saint-Marcel monastery nestled itself among the southern mountains, its reddish-brown tiled roof covered in moss, stone walls cracked by time. Winter hadn't yet arrived, but the wind had turned chilly, carrying the scent of wood ash and chapel bells echoing through the ancient pines. There weren't many children here, just a few abandoned at birth, raised by the sisters with love and discipline. Sylvie, a warm and quiet girl, had grown up here since she was 5. She had no surname, no original birth certificate, only a name written on a slip of paper placed in a wicker basket. Sylvie. In her early years, she often had nightmares. A recurring dream. 3 little girls sitting on an old bench, dressed in red, yellow, and blue. One laughed, one whispered, and one cried. She never told anyone, only silently wrote it down in her journal, in a secret symbol system she invented herself. 3 interlinked circles, beneath them a straight line and a square representing the bench. This symbol appeared dozens of times on the yellowing pages. Sister Julian, an elderly nun, once asked Sylvie, "You're drawing 3 circles again. Always 3. Sylvie nodded, eyes distant. "I don't know why. I just feel it." Once, when Sylvie was 8, she blurted out during a meal, "Daddy will sing me to sleep." Then she flinched, as if she herself didn't understand why she said it. Sister Julienne kept that phrase in her heart for years. She believed a child's memory never lies. That October, a man came to the monastery, Miguel Sandoval, the new cook. He was quiet, fond of classical music, and liked reading old newspapers. One evening, while wiping down the kitchen, he saw a news report showing Victor Langston, the man who had appeared in Sylvie's dream. Miguel froze. Years ago, when he worked at another orphanage, he had met Victor. That man had visited every charity institution, knocking on doors, showing old photos, and asking a single question: "Have you seen my child?" Miguel entered Sister Julienne's office, holding an item, an old photo Victor had once given him. 3 little girls, in red, yellow, and blue dresses, sitting on a bench, smiling innocently. And in the dim light, the shadow of a man holding a camera. He placed the photo in front of Sylvie without a word. Sylvie looked at the photo. A moment later, her hand trembled slightly. Her mouth repeated 3 words, very slowly. Bench, long. A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't know why. She only knew her heart had just been awakened by something very old, very real. Miguel asked gently, "Have you seen this photo before?" Sylvie shook her head, but her eyes never left the picture. "I don't know. But I do." That night, in the small room outside the chapel, Sylvie opened her journal and began redrawing the familiar symbol. But this time, she didn't use simple circles. She drew faces, 3 faces, and in the middle was herself. At the same time, over 100 kilometers away from the monastery, Victor Langston stood before the door of the psychiatric hospital where Matthew Bellamy was being held, awaiting trial. This was the first time he saw that man again, the one who had stolen not just 3 children, but 30 years of youth, his marriage, and his entire life. Bellamy sat there, handcuffed, eyes sunken, hair silver white. His accomplices, Sheriff Ruggles, Judge Elliot Monroe, the one who dismissed all of Victor's pleas for help, indirectly protecting Matthew, had all been summoned. Others had died or grown old and lost their memories, but their crimes had never disappeared. When Victor stepped in, his eyes gleamed with that familiar mockery. "I suppose you came here to hear me say sorry," Bellamy sneered. "But I won't, because you deserved everything that happened." Victor clenched his fists, knuckles turning white. Bellamy leaned back, his voice light. "I lost my wife, my child, everything. A month later, you invited me to your happy family birthday party. They laughed, they sang. You know what it felt like? A slap. So I slapped back." He bowed his head, whispering like a monologue. "You're the demon. I'm just the shadow of something you proudly flaunted." Victor stood still. For years he had lived in guilt, in nightmares, haunted by where he might have gone wrong. But facing this man, he understood. Some crimes need no reason. They are born of envy, of silent hatred. "Do you know those 3 children still sing that lullaby?" Victor asked, softly but firmly. "Even if you hypnotized them, erased it, changed their names, the song remained." Bellamy didn't answer. His eyes closed, and for the first time, he had nothing more to say. Victor left the room. He didn't lift his head, didn't look back, but his shoulders were no longer tense. He hadn't come for revenge. He came to witness. Cruelty cannot bury love. And he knew he was nearing the end. Because one final piece was waiting. An old wooden doll, a girl with picture memory, a long bench about to seat 3 once more. Late afternoon at Langston Hill bore a pale golden light, like dust settling on memory. Birds flew silently across the grayish-blue sky, leaving behind a contemplative calm. The Langston estate stood like a witness of time. Dark-tiled roof, weathered stone walls, a sparse wooden fence like wrinkles on the face of an old man, still hoping to be called home. That day, 3 young women came to the mansion. No one knew why exactly, nor who had invited them. All had received a handwritten letter, penned in simple strokes, with no name. Please come to Langston Hill on October 20th. Something that belongs to you and your future is waiting here. Ilara arrived first. She wore a long sweater, carried a fabric tote bag, and her eyes never left the grand house. Ela came next, carefully parking by the roadside, walking slowly, as if every stone on the path carried a piece of hazy memory. Sylvie arrived last, with Miguel. She stood a long time at the iron gate, hand gripping a weathered photo with frayed corners. Natalie Vance welcomed them, saying little, simply inviting them inside and letting the three sit on the long bench at the foot of the stairs. The oak bench Victor Langston had wiped clean every morning for 30 years. The living room was silent. Afternoon light slanted through the window frame, casting a warm golden hue over the three women. No one spoke. They didn't recognize each other, yet the air didn't feel unfamiliar. Victor sat in the distance, in a corner of the room, beside a low wooden table. In his hands was an old cassette recorder, the same one he had used to sing lullabies to his daughter every night. He pressed play. A vague melody began to play. Not very clear, but enough to reach someplace deep in the subconscious. The sound was rough, aged, full of static, but still gentle. Sleep well, my darlings. Daddy loves you. Close your eyes now. Ilara instinctively looked up, her eyes wide, as if straining to listen. Then her lips moved. No words, just a faint humming, the tune flowing softly from her throat as if long familiar. Isla turned to her, startled. Her hand unconsciously reached for Ilara. No one flinched, no one was afraid. That touch didn't feel like contact. It felt like recognition. A soft sigh escaped. Sylvie looked at the two of them. Her eyes held something between curiosity and nostalgia. She didn't know why the tune was familiar, but as all three listened, sat still, breathed together in that old melody, something within them stirred. Three voices, thin, hesitant, then blending into one. No one sang all the words, but the melody was whole, drifting gently, as if drawn from a shared memory. Sunset fell across the house walls, painting a faint hue like the edge of night. Isla whispered, barely audible, "We used to sit here, didn't we?" Victor said nothing. He stood, slowly walking toward them. The garden wind swept through the ajar window, rustling the curtain. He stopped just a few steps away. In his hand was a photo. "I don't want to force anyone to believe what they can't remember," he said, his voice hoarse. "But if there's something stirring in your hearts, then let this picture speak." He placed the photo on the small table before them. No one rushed to take it. But then Ilara reached out and touched its edge. Isla tilted her head. Sylvie suddenly choked up. The photo, already faded, corners peeling, captured three little girls sitting on this very bench, red, yellow, blue dresses, smiling, chirping, one of them pointing at the camera. Ilara whispered, her voice trembling, "This dress. I dreamed of it once." Isla held her hand. Sylvie reached out with the other, touching them both. Then, like a spring bursting from the earth, memories surged back, not complete, not clear by date, but in feelings, loud laughter, hands pulling each other around the garden, a tall two-tier birthday cake, and the man who sang lullabies every night. All three burst into tears. No one could say exactly why, but the tears fell in sync, as if their souls, once torn apart, were now piecing back together, not through events, not through stories, but through the rhythm of three hearts that had once been separated. Victor stood there, silent, his eyes red, his hands trembling, but not raised to wipe his tears, because he knew these tears were real, were from a day he once thought he'd never see again. Suddenly, he felt that the villains never paying the price no longer mattered as much as the fact that his family was whole again. Natalie, Jerome, Beatrice stood at a distance, not stepping in. No one had the right to intrude on that moment. Only the wind passed through the old wooden fence, then paused, as if also listening to the lullaby echoing once more. Victor spoke softly, almost a breath. "You've come home." 3 puzzle pieces, 3 lives, 3 souls once thought lost forever, had finally found their way back, not through evidence, not by the court, but by a love that could never be erased. 3 voices at once was not just the return of 3 stolen children, but a journey to reclaim memory, identity, and the most precious thing, the feeling of belonging to someone, to somewhere. Perhaps within each of us there are parts of memory long buried, unanswered questions, unfinished connections, and people we've forgotten or let go of, but quietly hope to be called back one day. Have you ever asked yourself, who would I be if I lost everyone who once held me as a child? Have you ever met someone whom your heart recognized before your mind did? If one day you unexpectedly hear an old song again, would you recognize it as a calling from a part of your life you once left behind? Please share with me, what did you see in this story? But if night has fallen, sleep early, and if the sun's still shining, make the most of your day. We're grateful you stayed with us till the end,